My name is Pastor Cliff Parks, and I'm one of the senior pastors here at Heaven's View Christian Fellowship. We are a church that heavily supports the ministry of jobs partnership. It is my pleasure to speak to you today about a subject that is very close to me, very important to me, and that is the role of the father, or the calling that a father has within the family. I have a bachelor's degree in theology and a master's in special education. I have spent time as a missionary and as a pastor and as a special education teacher. For the last 33 years, I've been involved in giving counsel or guidance to families that are in trouble, families that are experiencing difficulties, either as a pastor or as a teacher. And I want to share with you some of the experiences that I have had and some of the things that I have learned. Today we're going to approach the subject of the calling of the father actually from the standpoint of what happens to those that don't have a father, and what are the detriments to them when a father is not present in the family. In the book of James, in James 1 and verse 27, it says this. It says, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after the fatherless and the widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world." And so Scripture itself recognizes that when somebody is fatherless, there's going to be a deficit, there's going to be a hole that needs to be filled. And the counsel to the church is that the church, when there is a fatherless person within society, is to fill in where they can, to try to fill in the gap for the father and to fill those responsibilities for that family. The reason for that is that the fatherless in the Old Testament, and to a lesser extent in the New Testament, the fatherless in the Old Testament were almost always referred to as an oppressed subgroup within society. And they're this oppressed subgroup because it is through the father that many of the things happen within the family. It is through the father that the trade is passed on. Whatever trade the father has is passed on to the son. And so if that trade is not able to be passed on, then there's an economic difficulty then that comes to the family. It is the father that is the main wage earner in the family. And so when the father was absent, then almost assuredly that family was going to experience economic difficulty and poverty. There was a problem in the inheritance laws because the inheritance is passed on through the line of the father, and so when the father was absent, it interfered with the passing on of the inheritance to those that were supposed to get it. So when we look at the fatherless specifically in the Old Testament, it's always referred to as this oppressed subgroup that economically is going to have difficulties. And even in today's society, one of the main indicators of poverty, one of the main reasons that the families are impoverished is because you don't have two wage earners within the family. So when you have a single parent trying to support the whole family and trying to do everything, almost inevitably when you have communities that are majority single parents, that is going to be a community that suffers from poverty, from economic difficulty. So the fatherless in the Old Testament and even in our society today, many times are a subgroup that are oppressed economically. Now, fatherlessness doesn't always mean that a father is physically absent. There are a number of situations where a father may be physically present in the home, but because of addiction or because of health issues or because of some other cultural thing that happened in his family growing up, he's not fulfilling the responsibilities that a father would have within the home. So the symptoms of fatherlessness, the things that a child that does not have a father would suffer through, occur not just when a father is absent from the home, but when a father is not faithful to his responsibilities for whatever reason that may be. The distress of the fatherless, the things that they suffer, we would maybe refer to this as the curse of those that are fatherless. Has certain symptoms, and we can track those and we can examine those. In my experience as a pastor and as somebody who has ministered in a number of different neighborhoods that are economically challenged as well as challenged within their family structures, we see these symptoms come up fairly regularly. The first symptoms that you see with the fatherless is this dramatically increased rate of depression and anxiety for the children. And that's because they live with this insecurity of maybe not being able to handle the situations that are around them and not having the adult present that could help them with that. So we see increased rates of depression, increased rates of anxiety. We also see a lack of impulse control because it is many times the father that when somebody gets out of control will bring order to the family. And so when that father is not there, that lack of impulse control is not learned. Frequent episodes of uncontrolled rage for the same reasons. We see many times because of these, the rates of depression and the lack of impulse control, the uncontrolled rage, you see a decreased educational level because these are kids that don't do well in school when they're experiencing those types of issues. The decreased educational level then leads to a consistently lower average income level as these children grow as adults because they don't have the education to be able to achieve the things that they need to achieve. We see substantially increased rates of substance abuse that happen within families where the father is not present. And then the last thing that we see here that I think is especially sobering is that with those families where the father is not present, you see 5 times the average suicide rate. And it's difficult to deal with in a single parent. It's difficult in any family to deal with a child that is suicidal or that has suicidal tendencies. Very difficult when you're trying to deal with that situation in a single parent family. So let's ask the question then. We see what happens to the children, the symptoms that they display when a father is not present. So let's ask the question, what makes a father? Because as I said before, you can have a father present but still have the children exhibiting the symptoms of fatherlessness. A father is different than just being a sperm donor. You have sperm donors and you have those that are fathers or those that are dads, and there's a big difference between the two of them. Anybody that has biologically the right things going on and doesn't have health difficulties in that way can create a child, but not everybody can be a father or be a dad. There is a cultural approval that we see happening in our society today of becoming a parent, but becoming a parent without a commitment to the child. And so you'll have people within a community that have children in all kinds of different families, but they aren't really fulfilling the responsibility of being a father or being a parent to those children. And there is a cultural approval of that. I know when I was in college, there was a man that I was, a friend of mine, I guess, that was sleeping with any number of women without caring whether or not they were going to become pregnant, without caring about what happened to them or what happened to the children that he produced. And in some circles, that kind of behavior was seen as being manly, was seen as being something to be proud of. But in reality, he created children that grew up without the presence of somebody that could give them guidance in their life, without that father presence in their life. So what really makes a father is not the ability to make a child. What makes a father is being found faithful and accepting the responsibilities of being a father and a fatherly presence in those children's lives. So we're going to break that down a little bit, and we're going to talk about what those responsibilities are. If you're going to be faithful to the responsibilities, you've got to know what the responsibilities of a father are. And so we're going to break those down and talk about those, and this really outlines where we're going in this presentation as we talk about the responsibilities of a father. The first one is establishing a bond with the child. The second one that we're going to talk about is answering for the child the who am I question, giving the child a sense of identity. The third thing that we're going to talk about is guiding the child through rites of passage in their life as they move from childhood to adulthood. What are those rites of passage and how do we guide them through those rites of passage so that they become successful adults? And then the fourth thing we're going to talk about is bearing the burden for a child. There are certain burdens that a child should not have to bear, that a parent either bears alongside them and helps them with that, or bears for them. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is passing on a blessing to that child, so that as they grow to adulthood, there's a sense of security and a sense of understanding who they are, and a sense of being blessed, so that they have something to pass on to their children in the next generation. So let's go back now and let's begin with the idea of establishing a bond. When the bond is formed, a relationship, a bond with the parents, it is the avenue through which values and morals then are passed on. Bonds are formed really with a child. Relationship bonds are formed with a child between conception and 3 years old. The strongest bonds are formed then. And they're formed naturally, actually without any work. You form these bonds between conception and 3 years old, and really all you're doing is being present and being active in that child's life, and that bond will form with the parent. You can establish a bond with a child after that point, but it becomes learned behavior instead of instinctive. It's kind of the difference of speaking your native language and speaking a foreign language. When something is done naturally, like your native language, you just hear it and you naturally just, things happen and you pick it up and you begin to speak. If you're speaking English, your child begins to speak English. And bonds are that way. In the years 1 to 3, there is a natural bond that forms with the parent, and it really does not take a lot of work for that to happen. If you try to establish that bond after the age of 3, then the bond can still be formed. It just means that you've got to be a lot more intentional about forming that bond, just like if you were going to learn a foreign language. You have to be intentional about learning that foreign language. So what is successful bonding, and how does it help a child? Well, successful bonding helps a child to do a number of things. It helps a child to attain their full intellectual potential. There's actually, when a child successfully bonds with a parent, whether that be the father or the mother, there is actually a change in the chemicals of the brain, and the brain development flows naturally. And so when a child successfully bonds with a parent, it allows them to attain the full intellectual potential that was created in them. It also allows them, the successful bonding allows them to sort out what it is that they perceive. They watch the adults that are in their life, they watch the parents that are in their life, and they watch how they react to certain stimuli that come in. And so they take then the one they are bonded to, they take their perception and they apply it to themselves. And so as they watch these parents that they have bonded to and they work through life with them, they begin to understand how it is that I'm supposed to perceive something. What is a threat and what is not a threat? What is funny and what is not funny? What is sorrowful and what is not sorrowful? And they begin to understand and perceive things in a way that the one that they have bonded to perceives them, and it helps them sort out those types of issues. It helps them to think logically, because if you know if you understand and have a perception of the stimuli that is coming in, you can then think logically through what is happening, and you can make logical decisions. If you don't know how to perceive the stimuli that is coming in, then you don't know how to logically put that together in a response to that stimuli. But if you understand what you're seeing, you have a way to sort out what is being, what the stimuli that is coming in, then you can think logically and have a plan for responding to that stimuli. And if you can think logically, and if you can have a response and you understand what you're perceiving, then you have a lot less stress and a lot less frustration. It helps the child cope with stress and frustration because they can sort it out. They can think through it. They have a logical plan for thinking through the things that are coming to them. So you can cope with stress and frustration. You can handle fear and worry better. because you have a foundation for understanding what is coming in. You know what it is that is proper to fear and what is not proper to fear, because you have perceived that stimuli according to the understanding of those that you have bonded to. And so now you can handle fear and worry in a proper way. You know what to be fearful of and what not to be fearful of. You know what to worry about and what not to worry about. Because you have seen and you have taken on then the perception of those that you have bonded to. And when you have a plan for all of those things, and you're able to think through them logically, and you don't have to spend the time fearing and worrying about whether or not something is going to be dangerous to you or something is going to harm you, it allows then your brain to think about other things. It allows creativity. It allows for imagination, because your brain is not always in survival mode now. And so it allows you to be creative. It allows you to be imaginative. And successful bonding then contributes to all of these things. If a child is successfully bonded, you're going to have a child that can be creative. You're going to have a child that can use his imagination to think through other things that are not maybe concrete. And it helps then the child to develop future relationships, because as they watch the ones that they have bonded to work through relationships themselves, they take on those perceptions, they take on those attitudes, they take on the understanding that the person that they have bonded to has, and it helps them then give them a plan to develop future relationships and to know how to respond to the relationships that are in their lives. So all of those are the benefits of forming a bond. But then we have to ask the question then, if bonding is important in doing all of these things, what prevents then a bond from forming? And what interferes with that process? If we know what interferes with that process, then we can be more proactive in developing proper relationships and bonding properly. So what prevents the bonds from forming? Well, one of the things that prevents the bonds from forming is absentee parents. You cannot bond with somebody who is not there. That should seem obvious. So if a parent is absent for long periods of time, and this is not always the parent's fault, sometimes because of a health problem, the parent is not able to bond with the child in the way that they want to bond with the child. Sometimes because of geographical issues, or somebody is working and they're not always home, they're not able to bond with the child. And because of that, they're going to have certain challenges, and maybe later on they're going to have to come back and they're going to have to be more intentional about their bonding process. But when a parent is absent from the home for whatever reason, that prevents the bonding process from happening correctly. Another thing that will prevent the bond from forming is abusive parenting. When those that are supposed to be the ones you are most secure with, the ones that are providing safety to you, are actually the ones that abuse you, it throws everything into confusion. It initiates the fight or flight response, and that child then begins to live with that response continually. It's not just a one-time thing. It is something the child begins to live with. The chemicals in the brain change because they're constantly being flooded with adrenaline. They're constantly being flooded with this fight or flight response. And they're getting that from those that are supposed to be the ones that are making them feel safe and making them feel secure. And so when there is abusive parenting, the bonding process becomes almost impossible, because the child closes in and the child begins to protect themselves and doesn't allow themselves to bond with the parents that are around them. Bonding can also be prevented from forming when you have parents that are there but are not there. Children with parents that are addicted. The parent may be there, but if the parent is high and the parent is not able to fulfill their responsibilities as a parent, or if the parent is a workaholic, they're there but they're always working, then many times that bond does not form even though the parent is present physically. As I said before, sometimes there are health difficulties. that the parent may be struggling with, and because of that, they're not able to bond with their child. All of these things prevent the bond from forming naturally, and when the bond does not form naturally, there are consequences to that. Let's talk about now what happens to the child when the bond is not formed. When the bond is not formed, actually one of the things that is affected is the forming of a conscience within the child. The forming of the conscience is hindered. A child determines what is right and wrong based, in a properly bonded relationship, based on what they are seeing and perceiving from the adults that they are bonded to. If the adult that they are bonding to or should be bonding to is not present, or for some reason the bond is not formed, the child then determines what is right and wrong based not on what they have seen from an adult or perceived from an adult, but based on their short-term desires. That's all they have left. And so they base what is right and wrong on whether or not it feels right or it feels bad to them. It feels good or feels bad determines whether or not it is right or wrong. If it feels good, then it's right. If it feels bad, it's wrong. And so their conscience is based not on what is good or bad according to what is culturally acceptable or what might be good or bad for somebody else, but based on how they feel. And so because of this, because this interruption in the forming of the conscience, because not being able to determine what is right or wrong based on anything other than their own feelings, a child then has difficulty identifying with the needs of other people. The needs of other people simply don't enter in to that calculation. They don't see them as being important because right and wrong is based on how they feel about something and what they want and what they desire. So when this all kind of comes together and you have a child that really has not formed a conscience properly outside of their own desires and outside of what they just want in the immediate time frame, what happens is the development of an antisocial personality disorder. As a special education teacher, within my class, you had a lot of kids that were diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. And most of it traced its roots back to the idea that they have not bonded properly with a parent, specifically not bonded properly with a father who has given them the direction that they needed to form a conscience in a right and proper way. And so they end up with an antisocial personality disorder which disregards the needs and the desires or the rights of other individuals. When we see this bonding failure happen, it comes out in symptoms with children. And so as you're in a classroom, or as you're in a family, as you're working with a family, you see the children begin to develop and to begin to exhibit certain symptoms. One of the symptoms that we see most often is this lack of ability to give and receive affection. Because if they have not received affection in a proper way from the parents that they were supposed to have bonded to, then one of the things that happens with the child is the child begins to shut down. They begin to shut down their interactions with other people outside of what that person can give them to make them feel good and to satisfy their short-term desires. So they don't give affection, they don't receive affection in very well. They begin to withdraw from relationships, period. We see self-destructive behaviors begin to happen, because if nobody has really valued them and they haven't experienced that through the bonding process, then they have no reason to value themselves. And so they will do things that may bring destruction to themselves or harm to themselves. We see cruelty to pets or other weaker children begin to go on, because if everything is about what makes me feel good, if everything is about what I want, then the needs of other people are only relevant in pursuit of what I want. And so if I have to be cruel to somebody, or if I have to torment somebody who is weaker than me, then I will do that because I have really no conscience that has developed. We see other symptoms like phoniness, Many times children that have not bonded, they can be affectionate if it gets them what they want. And so we see a very manipulative behavior begin to form within those children. Stealing and hoarding, gorging, those things begin to exhibit themselves. A preoccupation with blood and with gore. Learning disorders then are very common when a child has these things happening within school. Developmental problems and learning disorders begin to also appear. And just in general, what you see within that child is just this idea that there are no real boundaries. There's just crazy living that happens, because the ones that were supposed to help that child establish the boundaries that he needed to provide structure in his life or her life, that person they never bonded with, and so those things haven't come back to them. In its extreme, a lack of bonding can result in sociopathic behavior. I want to read a piece from a book. It's entitled High Risk, Children Without Conscience. This is just a description of somebody who really did not bond with a person. It says, what is attachment? Is the title. It says, Danny is an unattached child. He has murdered 3 of the family cats. He has vandalized a neighbor's home so badly that it cost $6,000 to clean up the mess. He's tried to drown a visiting 12-year-old girl. He's set innumerable fires, one of which almost burned down a neighboring home after consuming a garage and outbuildings. He draws pictures of devils, demons, and gore even while sitting in church. He has stolen from, lied to, bullied, beat down, and terrified his brothers and sisters and parents. He has threatened to kill his family by setting the house on fire. Social workers say that Danny could just as easily kill you as look at you. This is an unattached child. This is a child that has not bonded, and in its extreme, these are the kind of behaviors that come from this lack of bond. Let's turn now to understanding the learning curve of a child. We go back to some of the intellectual progress that a child makes because of the bond, or doesn't make because of a lack of bond. And we have to understand some things. Half of all of our life's knowledge is learned in the first year of life. You know, we look at a little baby and we think, oh, well, the baby doesn't know very much, but what we don't understand sometimes is the amount of information that baby is processing. Everything that baby experiences, everything that they see, everything that they touch, everything that they taste is new to that child. And so that child's brain is taking all of that in, and that child is categorizing those things and calculating those things and understanding those things. And so the amount of knowledge that goes into an infant's life is amazing. Half of all of our life's knowledge is learned in that first year of life. And it is through the bond that we form with our parents that we gather that knowledge. And so if the bond is not formed, then much of the knowledge that child needs to learn through that first year of life is not gained during that time. And so in a child where the bond is not formed, it has to come later, and it has to be very intentional, and we have to work at getting that child the knowledge that they need to have, that they would have gained by nature in the first year of life if the bond had been formed. So how do we form the bond that needs to be formed with a child? How does that happen? Well, there are a number of ways that it happens, and the first one that helps the bond formed is the idea of face-to-face contact. When a child has face-to-face contact with a person, with a parent, that's how the bond begins to relate. It's not coincidence. A child's eyesight is best at about, is most focused at about 6 inches. And when we think about that, that's about the distance between a nursing child nursing at his mother's breast and her face. And so she will look down, and that child will look up at his mother's face, and as the child is nursing and receiving nourishment, he's staring into the eyes of his mother, and a bond forms in between that mother. You know, for a father to form that bond, a father gets down, and we all do this. We do it naturally, and maybe we don't know why we're doing it, but it actually forms the bond. We'll get into the face of a child, and we'll do the little baby talk. at the baby, and we get down and we're right down close to the face, and the baby sees us, and the baby begins to smile. The baby begins to connect. And what is happening actually during that time is that bonds are being formed. So through face-to-face contact, that bond is formed. Through touch and physical stimulation, that bond is formed. When a child is not touched, when a child does not have physical stimulation, a child will die. Because they need that stimulation, they need that touch to happen. And so as we hold the child, as we talk to the child, as we have the face-to-face contact, as we bathe the child, all the things that we do with the child to provide that touch and that physical stimulation helps the bond to form. And so when you are thinking about forming a bond with a child, it's important that you hold the child. It's important that you hold the child close to your face. It's important that when you bathe the child, that you're touching the child and giving that child the physical stimulation that they need. The other thing that we see in forming the bond is this idea of a repetitive trust cycle. A repetitive trust cycle must be completed again and again. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Every child, when they have a need, whether that need is that they're hungry, their diaper is wet or their diaper is dirty, whether they're in the dark and they want the light on, or they're scared, whatever need that child may have, then an infant has only one way to express that need. The infant will scream and the infant will cry. And there's a reason that the infant's cry is so piercing to an adult. You are not meant to ignore that. And so an infant will cry and scream and express the need in the only way that they can. All the different needs that a child can have expressed one way, a rage reaction. They're going to cry and they're going to scream. And so when that rage reaction happens with a child that is bonding properly with their parents, the rage reaction will happen, and the parent will come and will gratify the need that the child has and relieve the child of what it is that is bothering them, or satisfy whatever need that they have. And so that gratification occurs, and then that cycle then repeats over and over again. The infant expresses a need by screaming. There is this rage reaction that happens. The parent comes. The parent takes care of whatever the need is, gratifies that need, and it happens over and over and over again until eventually what the child learns is that I know who I can trust and who I can't. I know when I scream who comes to help me. I know when I cry who satisfies the needs that I have. I know who changes my diapers. I know who feeds me. And so the child begins to trust that person that comes on a regular basis. And that's the way the bond begins to form with the child. And so we've talked about this bonding process that happens and the importance of this bonding, and I think it's important that we start with that because that's the foundation of a lot of different things that we're going to go forward with in this presentation. But we move on from the bond to some of the other things that we've talked about at the beginning. The next thing that we're going to talk about is answering the who am I question. Satisfying the self-identification needs that a child has. Every child needs to know who they are and how they fit in to the larger context of their life. And so as a child has bonded with their parent, the next thing that needs to happen is they need to know, okay, as my life begins to expand out, how do I fit in? What do I do, and what are my relationships supposed to be with the other people in my life? It is the parent's responsibility to walk the child through those things so that they know how to fit into the larger context of their lives. And it begins with a nuclear family early in life. How does the child then respond to the father and the mother? And how does that bond form? But now you have brothers and sisters. How does that child fit into the brothers and sisters that are in the family? And what is the relationship with the older brother? What is the relationship with the younger sister? And how do those relationships work? And where do I fit in the pecking order, maybe, of things? and what are my responsibilities to my younger brother or my older sister. I grew up in a family where I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister. I was taught, because my brothers often babysat me, that you need to obey what your older brothers say. You need to listen to what they say, because they are going to keep you safe when we as the parents are not around. And so my relationship to my older brothers growing up was one of looking to them for guidance, looking to them for help through the challenges that I faced in my life. I had a younger sister, and I was told that your responsibility is to protect your younger sister. My father told me that if your younger sister is in trouble and you are there and you do not step in to help her, if somebody is picking on her, then you are going to be the one that gets in trouble, because your responsibility as the older brother is to protect your younger sister. And so I had a role that I played within the family with my younger sister, and a relationship that was there that I was taught to by those that I had bonded to. I was taught to by my parents. So we learn where we fit within the nuclear family, and then as we go forward, we learn a little bit about where we fit into the extended family. When we talk about the extended family, we're talking about grandparents, we're talking about aunts and uncles. And so as a child grows and their family begins to grow and the relationships begin to grow, how is it that that they are to treat their grandparents? And this actually extends out then, how do we treat elderly people, period? What are the values that we have within our family? And how do I work within the larger context of my extended family to fit in? How do I relate to my grandparents? How do I relate to my aunts and uncles? And how do I relate to elderly people in general? I was taught by my father, and he was very declarative about this and very firm about this, that when an older person walks in the room, you stand up. When your grandfather comes into the room, you stand up and you walk over and you say hello. When your grandmother walks into the room, you stand up and you offer your grandmother your seat, or you offer, you say hello to your grandmother. You honor those that are older, and I was taught that by my father. I was taught that by the one that I had bonded to, by my father and my mother, the ones that I had bonded to, how to relate within the extended family. So we understand how do we relate to our extended family. We understand then how do we relate to the community. As a parent, as a father, you have a responsibility to help them adjust to the school that they attend. What are the challenges that they are going to face? How do they face those challenges? How do we conduct ourselves within the classroom? And so, how do we conduct ourselves at school? How do we conduct ourselves at church to fit into those environments? And to be able to be functional within those environments. And that is the responsibility then of the father, the responsibility of the parent, to teach the children how it is that they deal with those different environments. And then as they grow and as they get older, the larger community. What are my responsibilities as a citizen? How do I conduct myself within the community, in the city, in the state, in the nation? How do I be a good citizen in the area that I'm at? One of my things that was my father's pet peeves was people that throw trash on the street. And so I was taught. We grew up in Oregon. It's an environmentalist place, but we were taught that the environment is very important. And if I were to take a piece of trash and throw it out of the car while we were traveling, that car would have been stopped. I would have been dealt with, and then I would have gone back and had to pick up everything that I dropped out of the car. My father taught me that as a citizen of the world, as a citizen in God's creation, this is how you treat the creation. This is how you fit in. And so we are taught these things by those that we have bonded to. How do we fit in to the context that we live in? The other thing that happens here is that a father helps his child build confidence by showing him where he or she fits into the larger picture, but also making sure they fit into new communities as they grow. As things change, that the child is able to change and transition to those new things. And much of that happens because the parent prepares them ahead of time for what it is that they're going to face. The parent who has already gone through these transitions knows ahead of time what the child is going to face, prepares them for that, and then walks them through that as they go through that. One of the other things that will develop the confidence and self-assurance in a child that is needed, and one of the things that a father or a parent then gives to that child is a personal sense of history. Where do I fit in my family from a historical sense? Where do I fit in my society from a historical sense? One of the things that you'll read in the Bible, and it's one of those things that's there, a lot of people don't understand why they're there, are the biblical genealogies. And you'll get to these parts in the Bible where it says, this person begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so, and you go through and it's just generation after generation of begats. And people look at that and wonder, why was that included in the Bible? Well, you have to understand, originally when people read those scriptures, they recognized their family in those scriptures. They recognized, okay, this is my family line, that so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so, and eventually that comes down to me. So these people are all my ancestors. These people are all people that historically are a part of my past. And basically, and as we follow that genealogical line down, that's the people who contributed to who I am and made me who I am. And so there is this sense of where I fit in history, this sense of who I am based on who the people that contributed to my gene makeup, who they are. And what that does for a child, knowing where they came from and who they are based on who their ancestors are, is it gives them a sense of courage and self-assurance because you know your roots, you know where you came from, you know who it is that you're supposed to be. And so there's a sense of self-assurance and a sense of courage that comes from that. I don't know if any of you remember the movie The Gladiator. It's one of my favorite movies. There is a scene in The Gladiator where the hero of the movie talks about who he is. And there is a sense of courage that he gains from understanding who he is. In this scene, he is facing the Emperor of Rome, and he's defying the Emperor of Rome. And it is a scene where he's very brave and very courageous. But this is what he says. He says, "My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the north, general of the Felix legions, loyal servant to the true emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next." See, he goes back and he recites who he is, who makes him what he is, and having this sense of who you are, having this sense of where you came from, having this sense of what your family valued, and because of that, what you value, gives you the self-assurance and gives you the courage to be able to face difficult situations. And that's one of the things that a parent then can pass on to his child. I know who I am, and he'll say, well, you're just like your grandfather, because your grandfather was this way. And this was passed on down through the line. He'll say, I see in you, we go back in our family history, and for me, we go back in our family history, and there are ministers, pastors in our family history. I come from a long line of Anglican pastors. I'm not Anglican, but in my background, there are a number of Anglican pastors that go back generations. And so the fact that I became a pastor was not surprising to my mother and my father. They said, that's in your blood, that's in your family. But it gives me a sense of history and a sense of assurance of who I am. One of the other ways that as parents and as fathers we help our children fit in is that we teach them the skills that are needed to fit into the environment that they're a part of. and the community that they're a part of. What used to happen in our society is that trades used to be passed on from one generation to the next as a part of who that individual was. If your name is Taylor, or your name is Carpenter, or your name is Parks, which is my name. All those names come from occupations that were passed on from family to from father to child, and the name Parks really comes from the idea that in Scotland and Wales, if you go back in my family, we were keepers of the royal parks, and we were park rangers. And that's where the name Parks comes from. If your name is Taylor, then most likely somewhere in your background, your family had the occupation of being a tailor. If your name is Carpenter, your family had the occupation of being a carpenter, and your names were taken from that. So one of the ways that a child fit in was through the trade that their family was a part of. And it would be assumed that for me, as my father being a park ranger, my ancestors being park rangers, it would be assumed that would be the trade that I would have, and I would be identified by my trade. And I would fit into the society because of my trade. This is what you're going to do. This is your place in society, and you're going to do that. And then as a child, my father would teach me the skills that are necessary for that trade so that I would fit in. So one of the ways that we help a child to fit in is by teaching them the skills that they need to move to the next level. And that's not always as easy in our own society, but teaching a child the skills that they need to fit into the community that they're a part of is something that is the responsibility of a parent. It may be that you're teaching a child to throw a ball to help them fit in. It may be that you're teaching a child how to sing or how to dance or how to help them fit into the society, but the skills that are necessary for them to do that are there. And as they get older, teaching them the skills that they need for an occupation, to perform an occupation properly is going to be important. And that may mean that you make sure that they get instruction on how to use a computer, or they learn the skills that are going to be necessary for the occupation that they want in, and you provide that kind of education. Another way that we help our child fit in is by helping them be comfortable with their sexual identity. A father especially is key in making a child feel comfortable with the sexual identity that God gave them. If we think about it this way, the son or the father is his son's role model, and he is his daughter's first romance. And I don't mean that in a weird way. What I mean is that a father to his son teaches him how it is that he is supposed to treat the opposite sex. It shows him how he is supposed to behave as a man, and the care and the concern that is to have towards the opposite sex. The father for the daughter teaches her how it is that she should expect to be treated by men in their life, and how it is that she should be respected, how it is that men should see her and treat her. The value that a child then places on their sexual identity is determined very much by the respect a father demonstrates towards that identity. If a child is uncomfortable in their sexual identity, then the temptation is available to either experiment or opt for another identity. That could be homosexuality, it could be bisexuality, or they can begin to try to prove themselves by exploiting themselves sexually, because they have not been made to feel comfortable with who it is that they are and what their sexuality is. One of the things that as a father I think was important to do, I'm a father of daughters, and so I took my daughters on dates. And I did that not because I just enjoyed spending time with the teenage girl and all of the talk of a teenage girl. That that at times was something that I endured rather than enjoyed. But I did that because I wanted them to know how to be treated on a date. I wanted them to know this is how a man should treat you. And so I would go on the date with my daughter, and I'd open the car door for her. I'd pull out the chair at the table for her. I would tell her how beautiful she looked when she walked down the stairs and met me for the date. I wanted to show her what it meant to be respected, so that when she begins to date on her own, and she meets a man who does not treat her with respect, she knows that this is not a man that she wants to spend time with. Kick this guy's butt to the curb because he's not worth it. So I wanted them to know this is how a man should behave towards you. And for sons, you want to be able to teach them. This is how you treat a woman. This is the respect that you show towards a woman. You don't ever take advantage of a woman. You don't ever, treat her in a disrespectful way. And so you want to teach that to your sons so that they're comfortable with their sexual identity, that you protect the woman that is there. And they're comfortable with their sexual identity and the role that they play in those relationships. One of the other things that we're going to talk about here as far as the process of being a father, the role of a father, is helping our children through rites of passage. As our child grows, they move from being a child to being an adult. And there should be rites of passage that they go through, and the father then acts as a guide through those rites of passage. Father's responsibility is to create some of those rites of passage where there are not rites of passage, and then to guide the children through them. One of the difficulties that we have in our society is that we have kids that are wondering whether or not they have become a man or whether or not they have become a woman. And they will do things to prove, this proves that I am a man, or this proves that I'm a woman. And if we're not guiding that, they will find things to prove that they are a man or a woman that are not appropriate or not helpful or even dangerous to them. A father's responsibility is to find rites of passage that are appropriate and helpful to their children, and then guide the children through those rites of passage. And most tribal societies have these systems where there is a formal recognition of the passage from childhood to adulthood. There's a tribe in Africa where the fathers will take the teenage sons. They've reached a certain age, and they'll take them out, and they'll take them from the village, and they'll take them out into the bush, and they will leave them in the bush. Now, they don't really leave them. What the fathers do is they surround them, and they make sure that there's nothing dangerous that is going to happen to them. But they leave them alone, and these teenagers have to form their own society. They have to hunt for themselves. They have to survive for themselves. They have to form a team working together within that group, and they exist out in the bush for about 2 weeks. At the end of that 2 weeks, once they have successfully completed that time together, the fathers come back, and they take their sons back to the village, and they tell the village, my son left this village as a boy. He has now completed this trial and this rite of passage, and he comes back to the tribe as a man. He has all of the rights and the privileges now of a man within the village, and he is no longer a boy, and it is announced to the village, and that from that point on, that one who was previously a boy is treated as a man within the village. It's a very formal rite of passage, a very firm understanding of now I was a boy and now I am a man. And so there is no confusion in the mind of the child. One of the problems that we have with gangs, with violence in our society, is that we have young men and young women sometimes trying to prove that they are adults. And in the absence of guidance, they prove they're adults by violently overthrowing somebody else, violently doing something to somebody else, and proving that they are dominant in that situation. Many times people try to prove they are an adult, a man or a woman, through sexual conquest or through having a baby. I'm having a baby, therefore I have proved that now I am a woman. And without proper guidance, our kids will turn to things that are not helpful to them in their growth, to be able to prove that they are a man or prove that they are a woman. When the rights are clear and they are recognized by everybody around them, then there isn't that confusion. Problem is that we're missing a lot of clear rites of passage in our society today. And our society is full of adolescents that are trying to prove they're adults. But there are rites of passage out there. There are things like getting a driver's license, where if we use it appropriately, and we can train our child in driving and show them, okay, this is how you do everything, and there has to be a certain level of skill mastery that is associated with that. They go and they take their test, and they pass their test, and we talk to them about, you were a child before and you weren't able to handle this responsibility, and now you have been trained and now you can handle this responsibility. Now you have a license, and now I expect you to function as a young man or as a young woman in this, fulfilling the responsibilities of a man or woman as you have this car, and handling it as you would an adult, as an adult would. And so there is a rite of passage that goes with a license. There are graduations that we have from middle school, from high school, from college, that help children transition, if we will use them appropriately, transition from the idea of I was a child to now I am becoming an adult to now I am an adult. And so we can help them with some very clear rites of passage, and then levels of skill mastery that go with that. And identifying, you've mastered these skills, therefore this is happening to you. And you've demonstrated this responsibility, therefore you are moving to this next level. And we can help them identify their movement from adolescence to adulthood based on those rites of passage. And problems arise when there are no rites of passage and the message of the parents is unclear to the children. Problems arise when parents hold on to a child too long after there has been mastery of skills. After a child has mastered the adult skills that are necessary for the passage, but the parent simply won't let go. Then problems arise in allowing that child to move to adulthood. Problems arise when parents do not train the child in the skills, believing that somehow automatically at 18 that child will automatically become an adult. The child has never cooked a meal, the child has never driven a car, the child has never held a job, the child has never been required to do anything within the house, but you know what, that child's 18 and so now they're out. And they're expected to function as an adult. When we do that to a child, we guarantee their failure as an adult. And we haven't walked them through the proper rites of passage. The next thing that we're going to talk about when we're talking about the role of a father and what a child does for his kids in fulfilling that role is the idea of bearing the burden. When the load becomes too heavy for our child to bear. And understand that there are some burdens that are too heavy, that our children were never meant to bear alone, and they cannot bear them alone without damaging themselves. There are things that happen in our society that were meant for adults to carry the weight of. And when we put that burden on a child, we damage that child, we hurt that child. It is a father's responsibility to bear the burden with the child, and sometimes when the load is just impossible for the child to carry, to bear the burden for the child. When we think about it, God models this for us. God does not put burdens on us that are too heavy for us to bear. There are promises in the Bible about that. That I will not try you beyond what you are able to bear. I will walk with you through those. God doesn't always promise to airlift us out of the trials that we have, but what he does promise us is that he will be there with us in the midst of those trials. If you read Psalm 23, it talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. He says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear, not because you will take me out of the problems, but because you are there with me. I will not fear, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And so sometimes our children will go through difficulties, and there will be burdens that will be placed on them, and we assist them by walking with them and helping them to bear that burden until they are able to bear that burden on their own. But it's important to understand that children should not be asked to bear burdens that are inappropriate burdens. Adults need to be adults, and children need to be adults, and there are some burdens that are meant just for adults. Jesus walks with us. He is the good shepherd. He walks with us through the valley of the shadow of death. But there came a time in Jesus' ministry when he realized the burdens that should be ours were too heavy for us to bear. And so when that burden became too heavy for us to bear at all, Jesus didn't just share the burden with us, he bore the burden for us. Jesus went to the cross for us because we couldn't bear the burden of sin for ourselves. And so he bore that burden on himself. There are times in our kids' lives when the burden simply is not theirs. It's not theirs to share. It should be the adult that carries it. And so we need to share our children's burdens with them, and then sometimes take that burden on to ourselves when it becomes too heavy for them. When I was 18, I was in a car accident. We were hit by a drunk driver. We were hit, and I was driving the car that was hit. My sister and a friend of mine were severely hurt to the point where we thought that they might die. Severe injuries. When I came to, I couldn't remember what had happened. All I remembered was that I was driving, and now my sister and one of my best friends were on the verge of death. And I knew that I would have to face the families, the family of my best friend and my own family if my sister died. I held on to that while I was in the emergency room until my father came in. And when my father came in, there was somebody finally big enough, and my father came over and grabbed my hand, and he said, "You don't worry about this." He said, "I got this. I got this." And at that point, everything just folded for me. I broke into tears, and all of the burden that I had just kind of poured out because I felt that I couldn't remember what had happened. I thought that I was responsible. Finally, my dad had come, and he was big enough and he was strong enough to bear the burden for me that I could not bear myself. And I was just able to empty all of that out. Sometimes we have to do that for our kids. There's burdens that are too big for them. And we have to bear them as adults for our kids. The other thing that we need to do for our kids, as we're talking about these burdens, is that we need to point them to God, who has big enough shoulders to handle all of our struggles. See, sometimes the burdens that we face and the burden that they're going to face, they're too big even for the adult in the room. And so the adult's responsibility then is to point them to God, to point them to the one who can bear all of those burdens. And so as we walk our children through these things, we teach them how to pray. We teach them where we go when we're feeling burdens. We teach them that their God never leaves them. Even though the problem may even be too big for their father, it's not too big for God. And so we teach them to pray. We teach them to go to God with the burdens that they have. And we teach them to do that because we realize that we won't always be around. My father has died. I can no longer go to my father and ask him to bear this burden with me, but I can go to my God. My father taught me how to pray. My father taught me how to go to God. And so I can go to him and he will share those burdens with me. So we've talked a lot about ministering to the fatherless or the responsibility of the father. we have to ask the question now, what do I do if I am the one that was fatherless? If I am the one that did not have the person that bonded with me, and because of that, I have some of those things happening in my life that are damaging to me, that were damaging, continue to be damaging to me. What happens when I don't have the blessing that a father in my life should have given me? Well, understand first of all that growing up without a father or a father figure leaves a wound in your life. And a wound doesn't always get less painful with time. If you don't address it, and if you don't take care of the wound, that wound will fester, and that wound will get worse. And feelings of not belonging, feelings of not fitting in, will not get better as you get older, but they will become more difficult to deal with because the situations are more difficult. And so these feelings that you have of not belonging, not fitting in, not knowing what to do, sometimes those will get worse instead of better with age. We need to understand what the wound looks like. When we have this wound from being fatherless, it will exhibit itself in different ways with different people. There is the shattered, where an adult that did not have a father will live their life in fear, will have anxiety. There will be emotional withdrawal because they fear having interactions with others, because the people that were supposed to be there, the people that were supposed to be most important to them, either were not there or were actually damaging to them in that relationship. And so they fear relationships, they fear interactions with other people and interactions with the world that is around them. There are those that turn into the smotherer, where there are years of emotional need that they have, and then when somebody finally gives them a sympathetic ear, all of those needs pour out, and there isn't the ability to hold back in an appropriate way. It's just anybody that has a sympathetic ear is going to all of a sudden hear everything, and all of the emotions that are suppressed are going to be dumped out on that individual. And so when we see that happening, we understand, okay, there is a wound that was there that this person is experiencing, and what we are seeing is the expression of that wound. There are those that just turn angry. Angry over the missed blessing that they had, that I didn't have a father growing up, or my parents were not what my parents should have been, and there's anger over that, and that anger then gets transferred to others who really have no part in the initial wound. You just become an angry person. And that anger gets transferred to people that had no part of the initial wound, but they are being affected by it because of the wound that happened inside of you. There is the detached. I'm not going to let anybody close. I would rather have loneliness rather than risk rejection, because all I've experienced in my life is rejection by those that were supposed to be the closest to me and I was supposed to form a bond with. One of the things that we see most common with people that do not have fathers is the driven. You would be amazed at how many CEOs, how many heads of companies had some aspect of fatherlessness in their life. And they felt that what I need to do because my father or my parent is not paying attention to me, or I'm not getting the attention or the bond that I need, what I need to do is I need to earn it. And so they work really, really hard to get affection from people that they view as being father figures or being parental figures. And they become driven in their life, extreme perfectionists. And they go after blessings from those that they would view as father figures or parental figures, or from other people as they grow older. They get used to the idea that I've got to earn all of these blessings. I've got to earn it. And so they become perfectionists. They become driven in their lives. And many times will drive other people to act the same way, because that's what they expect of themselves, they'll expect of other people, and they're very difficult people sometimes to be around, because they're very demanding of other people's lives. And then the last one that we have that we're going to look at is the one who seduces. the one who did not receive the love that they needed, did not receive the acceptance they needed. And so they learn that through sexual encounters, through seduction, or through substance abuse, or through some other form of abuse, I can get the affection or the acceptance that I need, and they seek it in very inappropriate ways. So as you look at these symptoms and you think, okay, there's something about this that identifies me, or that I identify with because I am fatherless, or I didn't have the parents that I had, and I have this wound. You ask the question, then what do I do? What do I do about this wound that is alive in me as an adult because of something that happened to me growing up? Well, the first thing that you do is be honest about the wound. Recognize it, be honest about it, recognize that you're suffering from this, and that it hasn't gone away, and that you still have pain from this. One of the things that the book of John tells us is that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And so it's important when we have these symptoms that we understand what it is that's causing it, and we understand the truth of what is behind it. When we do that, and we understand what is happening, we can begin to seek to understand. We can begin to seek to understand maybe why our parents behaved the way our parents behaved. Why did I not get what I needed from my parent? Why do I have this wound? And as we understand our parents' background, and perhaps they had a wound and they were doing the best that they could, when we begin to understand our parents' background and we begin to understand why they did what they did, we can begin then the process of forgiveness. We can begin to understand why they did what they did, and maybe it hurt us, and maybe it was a problem for us, but we can begin to understand it, we can begin to forgive because we understand them. Now, forgiveness, understand that forgiveness does not mean that someone who hurt you is getting away with something. We have difficulty sometimes when we, especially with a parent, to forgive that parent because we feel like, well, we're just letting them get away with the fact that they didn't fulfill the responsibility. Forgiveness does not mean that someone who hurt you is getting away with something. What forgiveness does is forgiveness releases you from the responsibility of passing judgment and getting even. Forgiveness sets you free from holding that burden. That I'm no longer going to hold that debt. I'm no longer going to be responsible for holding that burden. I'm going to give it away, and I'm going to let God deal with that. And I'm going to free myself from that burden of holding that debt. And God then, who is able to handle that burden, will handle that burden for me. The next thing that you need to understand, if you have not had a father and you're suffering from some of these things from the wound, is that God is more powerful than the curse. Healing begins then with a commitment to Christ. And through that commitment to Christ, you receive power. You receive something that you did not have before. God can give you, you can bond with Jesus, and you can bond with God, and He'll give you something that you did not have before. He can give you the power to be intentional. He can give you the power to be intentionally hopeful, and He can give you the increased self-control that you need that may be lacking because of things that happened in your childhood and things that happened as you grew into adulthood. One of the other things that God does for us is that God can give you a family. Maybe where you didn't have a proper family before, God can supply that for you now. A believer's spiritual heritage is secure. Jesus says, I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. So the bond with Him is secure. And that bond can form the foundation then that you need to form a different kind of family. One of the blessings of belonging to a church is that a church consists of mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. It consists of family members that will receive you, accept you, and you can have that family maybe that you did not have before. You can have it within the context of the church. I do not live now where I lived before. I moved away from my family, but in my church, I have mothers and fathers. I have people that I call mom. I have people that I call dad, that are not my blood mother or not my blood father, but they are mothers and fathers to me, and they fulfill that role for me in my life. Now, as I get older, I have children that are a part of the church that call me uncle. That or some that will call me, that don't have a dad themselves, that will call me dad, or that, and there is that family relationship and that father relationship. Some that call me grandpa, because I am getting much older now, and so there is that family relationship that is there with members of the church, and it's one of the things that the church provides. Mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and grandparents, aunts and uncles, all of those things are provided within the church, and he can give you that kind of family if you're willing to reach out and willing to become a part of a church. Your healing then from this wound that you have begins to happen when you do all of these things. When it begins to happen when you turn to God and God allows you to heal. When you recognize the wound and recognize what has happened. When you begin to forgive. And then lastly, this healing completes itself then when you begin giving others what it is that you did not have. Healing is completed when you stop the cycle. Saying, yes, this happened to me in my life. I did not have, my parents did not fulfill the responsibilities that they had. And because of that, I was wounded. And because of that, I had pain. And because of that, all of these things happened in my life. And all of this is true. And I'm working on forgiving them, and I'm working on becoming whole myself. But the one thing that I want to be sure of is that I drive a stake in the ground and it goes no further. That this does not happen to my kids, that this does not happen to the kids that are in my church. Our healing is completed when you stop the cycle. And when you become then the adult that is willing to bond with your children, that is willing to bond with kids that are in your church that don't have a father, that don't have the parents that they need. And you begin to fulfill that function, that is actually when you then complete your healing. And when you become strong and you become healthy yourself. Healing is completed when you stop the cycle. Then one of the other things that we do as parents, one of the things that we do as a father, and this is the last thing that we'll be talking about, is that we have the responsibility as a father to pass on the blessing. Pass on the blessing to our kids, to pass on the blessings to those that are in our community of faith maybe, that do not have the blessing of having parents in the way that they needed to. The blessing that we have that we can pass on is passed on in several different ways. One, it's passed on in meaningful touch. Kids that do not have parents that are functioning the way they have lack the physical touch that they need, the meaningful touch that they need. And in this, I mean appropriate touch. We need to be careful in our society today to make sure that what we do is appropriate towards children, especially children that are not ours, and that we touch them appropriately, but we touch them meaningfully. Kids need to wrestle with an adult. Little boys, they need that wrestling. They need that physical contact. Kids need to be hugged. Kids need to be, to be kissed on a little bit and just have that affection that comes from an adult in an appropriate way. And so meaningful touch is important to be able to pass on something to the kids that are in our lives that maybe they aren't experiencing, that they don't have, to limit the curse that might be in their life, to make them feel more secure about who they are. And so this meaningful touch is important to be able to use to pass on the blessing to them. Spoken words of blessing is important, that we talk to the kids, and important especially with little kids, that you get down, maybe you get down on your knees and you look at them in the eye and that you talk to them about their lives. Talk to them about what you see that is good in their lives, because sometimes they're not aware of the good that they do. They're not aware of the good that is in them until somebody points that out. Now that typically is the responsibility of a parent. But if a parent is not doing their job, or a parent is absent, then it becomes the responsibility of others to be able to pass that on to their kids. So if you have kids, make sure that you're looking them in the eye and you're talking to them about what you see in them. I see that this is how God has made you, and this is the wonderful gifts that God has given you, and you're so talented in this area, or you're such a great musician, or you're so smart. You wrote this thing, and I never would have been able to write that when I was your age. But you do that so well that you can see how God has gifted you in that area. And you speak these words of blessing to them, helping to recognize the things about themselves that are good and that are positive, and you make them secure and you make them confident in what it is that they are doing. And in that there is this expression of high value that, do you know how much I love you? Do you know how much that I care for you? And we as parents need to learn how to express love. Some of us come from very withdrawn families where love was not talked about and love was not expressed. But we as parents, if that has been the pattern in our family, need to break that pattern because it's one of the things that makes our children feel secure and feel confident is the expression of high value. That I honor you, I love you, I care about you, you are important to me, that our kids know that, they understand that. And then lastly, to help them picture then a special future. When we talk to them about, this is what I see in you, this is what I see you doing well, do we help them connect to what might be a possible future for them? I look at you and you speak so well in front of an audience. You're not shy and you speak well. Maybe you should look at do something in the area of broadcasting, or maybe you should be do something in the area of public speaking. I look and see how you write, and you're so expressive in how you write. There are professions that go along with that, and you can write books, and you can write stories, and you can do all of these things and show them a creative outlet for what it is that God has gifted them in. You're good at math. Do you realize how many professions are needful of people that are good at math? And you name the talent: athletics, music, mechanics. You're so good at working with your hands, you put things together, and I think that's how God has gifted you. And these are the different ways that you can use that. Help them see a future for themselves. Help them see how God has gifted them and how that might be used. And give them that sense of security and understanding of who they are that will help them be confident in the future. And then commit to the child. Make a commitment to the child that either you have brought into the world, or the child that is important to you in your community, and fulfilling that father role or fulfilling that parent role to that child. Commit them to the Lord in prayer regularly. One of the best things that we can do for the children that we care about, the children that need fathers and need mothers, is that we can commit them to the Lord in prayer regularly to make up the difference where maybe we fall short. So pray for them. Pray that God would act in their life. Pray that God would be obvious to them in their life and that they would have a relationship with Him. Commit then also, along with committing them to the Lord, commit to acting in their best interest. Being aware of what is happening in their lives and being aware of what it is that they need, and being an advocate for them and acting in their best interest. Become a student of your child. Know them. You cannot help somebody in a way that is meaningful to them if you do not know them. And every child is different. Every child has different talents. Every child has different struggles. Every child has a different way of being. And if you know them, you can help them. If you don't know them, you are not going to be the help that you need to be to them. So commit to becoming a student of your child. Know who they are and know who God created them to be. And then commit to the other parts of the blessing that we talked about earlier in this time that we've had together. Commit to doing those things that are necessary to make them secure, to make them strong, to make them courageous and brave, to move them from being a child to being an adult and making that transition. commit to the other parts of the blessing that we've already talked about. There is a reward for fulfilling the role of a father. Fathering is a kingdom activity, and time spent fathering is time well spent. So do not feel that you are wasting your time. Do not feel that there's something more important that you could be doing. There is very little that is more important than fulfilling the role of a parent, fulfilling the role of a father. And there is a reward that comes to those that fulfill that calling. Part of that reward is satisfaction of seeing the blessing and the faithfulness passed on to the next generations, seeing what you believed and the faithfulness that you have, the blessing that is in you, seeing other people pick that up and being able to carry that to the next generation, seeing that relationship that you have with God being carried on in your children, that relationship that they have. Part of the reward is that your children and your grandchildren will honor you. They will love those who love them. Maybe not all the time and maybe not immediately, but if you are consistent and you love them and you do what is in their best interest and you care for them, then eventually all of that is going to come back, and they will honor you and they will love you. And part of the reward of being a parent, a father, a grandfather, a grandparent, is that your children and grandchildren will come back and they will honor you in your life. And the reward is not just in this life. The reward is also in the next life. Part of being a faithful man or a faithful woman, if you are a mother, is being faithful in the parenting responsibilities that you have. And there is a reward in the next life for those that are faithful. And then one of the last things that I want to say, because we've talked a lot about the wounds that people have, we've talked a lot about the deficiencies in parenting, and we've talked about people that are in different stages of hurt and different stages of pain. And it's easy to do something like this and to think that, well, it's hopeless for me because, I never had a parent. I don't know how to parent. I don't know, there's so much that I don't know. And it's easy to, after going through a session like this, to feel like I'm so far behind that I can't catch up. I want you to know that God will meet you where you are. And God will help you and will make up the differences for you. Assess your personal relationship with your parents. Assess where that is at. And figure out, okay, what is the next step that I need to make in my relationship with my parents? Do I need to forgive? Do I need to restore that relationship? Is this something that I can move forward in? And what I did not have as a child, maybe I can have as an adult with my parents. Assess the state of your current family. If you are a father or a mother in a family, what is the state of the relationship with your kids? Has the bonding occurred with your kids that should occur, that needs to occur? If not, then what is it that needs to change to take the next step in the bonding? What is it that needs to take place to help my child walk through the stages and guide them through the rites of passage that need to happen? What burdens do I need to bear for my child? Where is my family right now? And what is it that is the immediate need? Understand that you cannot correct everything at once. And the goal is not to move from 0 to level 100 in a day. The goal is to move in the right direction. And so as you look at your family and you see the needs of your family, ask yourself, what is the next step? What is the next thing that I can do to get better as a father, to get better as a parent? What is the next thing that I can do to make my child feel more secure? What is the next thing that I can do to give my child guidance? The goal is to move in the right direction. The goal is not to achieve perfection in one day, or honestly, none of us will achieve perfection in our lifetime. I've been a parent of 3 daughters. I'm a grandparent now, and I don't do everything that I should do. I look back on what I do, and I think I should have done that better, or I should have, or I need to do this instead. And I'm always making adjustments and asking myself, what is the next thing that I need to do as a parent? What is the next thing that I need to do as a grandparent to help my kids? The goal is not to move from ground zero to perfection. The goal is to move in the right direction and to get better at this. And then hopefully our kids who experience that will even be better than we are at being a parent and being a grandparent in the generations to follow. And then lastly, understand that God will help you. If this seems overwhelming, understand that that's okay, because we don't do this alone. God will help. He will not leave you. He will not forsake you. And He will help you in raising your children. He will help you in being a father. He will help you in being a parent, a mother if you are a mother. He will assist in all of those things. And He will give you guidance. If you call out to Him and you seek His guidance and you seek Him in prayer, He will answer, and He will give you the answers that you need to be able to be of help and assistance to your children. Thank you for letting me have this time with you. I just pray for God's blessings on your families. I pray for God's blessings on you as parents, as grandparents, and look forward to hearing stories of success in your lives as we have the chance to meet you and the chance to talk with you. Thank you again for letting me share this time with you.